What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Celio's Network, and today I'm bringing you the meta forecast and best decks for the Limitless Invitational Qualifier number 1, which is going to be played tomorrow, Saturday, April 4th, and then the additional Swiss rounds, if necessary, and top cut will be Sunday, April 5th. You can find all the information there at limitlesstcg.com. Should be right on their front page, and you can get signed up, registered, and learn how to communicate with your opponents and play the rounds there. So shout out to Limitless TCG for putting this on and having me as one of their content creators as well. You can vote for me when you are in the qualifiers. Each participant of the qualifiers gets a vote for their favorite content creator, and the vote goes towards the content creator getting a spot in the invitational. I'll also be competing in all of the qualifiers anyway. It should be fun. I'm gonna get content out of it, and it helps me analyze the meta a little more and have some more input on the forecast and the best decks if I'm testing for these events and playing in them, of course. And there's also prize money and prizes and everything involved, so it should be very fun. And also, the first qualifier is sponsored by my sponsor, PotownStore.com, which is the best place for you to get PTCGO codes. You can use code CELIO for 5% off over there. And PTCGO codes are pretty important right now since all of our tournaments are on PTCGO, so definitely go over there and grab some codes for yourself. So the meta forecast, we'll start off with that. This is going to be my estimations of what I think the meta share will look like for the first qualifier. So let's focus first on the right 50% of the pie chart. So we've got, of course, Zacian v ADP. I have that at a whopping 25%, and normally it would go against how I usually look at populations of day ones, but I really do think Zacian ADP could and probably will be around 25% of the day one population for the tournament. It's just a very consistent deck. It's performed so well since it came out. I think it's been somewhere like close to 50% of the CP earned at major events since it came out. It's just a dominating deck, and there are plenty of other decks in the meta, as you can see on this pie chart, so it hasn't created of like a format or a meta of just a few decks, which is nice, but this deck is just definitively the best deck based on results, performances, consistency, matchups. So Zacian, I definitely think, will be the most played deck. Expect to play against that a few times. If we're having like 14 plus rounds, I think, of 25 minutes best of one Swiss, Zacian v ADP, probably like 4 of your matches. And then we'll go to Spelltag Malamar, which I have as the second most popular deck according to my predictions at around 15%. So Spelltag Malamar, I think this has the best matchup spread in the meta. Now, of course, I don't think it's the best deck. It's not as consistent as Zacian v ADP, which is stopping it from being the best deck. It doesn't have a favored Zacian v ADP matchup, in my opinion. It's an even matchup. Maybe slightly favored, depending on how you build your list and how consistent your list is. But I do think it's up there in the good decks. I think it has the best matchup spread, but I don't think it's the best deck because, like I said, the consistency is not where Zacian v ADP's is, and it also doesn't have a very favored Zacian v ADP matchup, which is why some people might not play it. Like, some people might either want to play Zacian or a deck that beats it and nothing in between. But I do think Spelltag Malamar will be very popular. Malamar is just a deck that many players have grown accustomed to since it's been around for a while. They already have the cards on PTCGO, which is a big plus. Maybe they are between playing Zacian or Spelltag Malamar, but they don't want to trade for 3 or 4 Zacians online, so they just stick to Malamar. Or maybe that's just the deck they like. Some people do really like Malamar, so I expect it to show up in numbers The next one in my big three here is Baby Blacephalon. Stefan Ivanov, I think, has really pushed Baby Blacephalon to being as good as it can be. He's a great player, and he's made a good list for it, and he's really made a strong argument for Baby Blacephalon with his performances with it, his content on it. He was on the Slowpoke Wells meta forecast for this tournament. Talked a little bit about Baby Blowns over there. If you wanted to check out some more Limitless qualifier content, the Slowpoke Well on YouTube. But Baby Blacephalon has a good Zacian v-ADP matchup, and it's probably one of the only decks that I can definitively say should beat Zacian v-ADP most of the time. Now, Zacian v-ADP is the best deck for a reason. It does beat Baby Blounds sometimes, so like that's just another testament to Zacian v-ADP's strength. It actually does beat Baby Blounds sometime, maybe like 30-35% of the time, maybe even 40, because Zacian v-ADP is just bonkers. But Baby Blounds, I think, is a very good deck. It's fairly inexpensive. It uses Jirachis, but it doesn't use multiple Dedenes, and it doesn't use multiple Zacians. And so I do think Baby Blounds will be up there in the 10% range for the tournament. So I do think 50% or around that of the tournament will be Zacian, Spell Tag, and Baby Blounds. So maybe their individual percentages will fluctuate a bit, but I do expect 50% of the tournament to be those. So half of your rounds will probably be against this deck. So if you have a deck that you think is favored versus all three of these decks, then that sounds like a very good idea to me. The last two I'll touch here on this pie chart is Cinccino Mill and Pikarom. So Pikarom, I have talked about. I do think it's up around the best deck area, but it doesn't have as much love right now as the other three I talked about do. I think it's very consistent. Its matchup spread is horrible, but its consistency and the inherent power of the cards make it perform better than it looks like it should on paper. So I guess really its matchup spread isn't horrible if it ends up winning, but if you're looking at like a generated spreadsheet type matchup spread, or like on paper this deck should beat this deck, Pikarom usually doesn't look too good. But it's consistent and it's fast and it does what it wants to do a lot of the time. So I do think Pikarom is still a top deck, but I don't think it has the popularity around it and also the ease of access to the cards. So I think that'll be a little bit lower at around, the 8% range. And then again, with Cinccino Mill, around 8% is the other deck I'll talk about here. I do think Cinccino Mill is an okay play for this tournament. I thought it was a better play a few days ago than I do right now. I'm recording this Friday morning. And that's why I waited to record this, because I wanted to have my most updated thoughts for this tournament. Since usually for a regional or an IC or something, if I'm traveling to the event, I usually can't record the meta forecast or a discussion video or something like this right before the tournament. But since this is online, I have the freedom to do that a little bit more than usual. So Cinccino Mill, I think it will see around the same amount of play as Pikarom, but less play than Malamar and Baby Blounds, to put it into that perspective, around the 8% mark to my estimations. So I think you'll play against Mill one or two times, depending on if it's doing well and you're doing well, or it's doing poorly and you're doing poorly. Probably a couple times you'll see Mill. Of course, that's for the average player, so you could see 10 Zacian ADP and 4 Spelltag Malamar and nothing else, and be one of, like, you're on the outlier there. Or you could not play against a single ADP and only play against everything else on the pie chart. So, of course, it's all possible. So, when I'm saying, you'll play against a couple mil, that's for the average player will probably hit 1 to 2 mil. So I don't think you need to base your day around can I beat Mill. The average player does not need to worry about that. But if you can't beat Mill and you can't beat Baby Blounds and you can't beat, let's pick one of the lower decks, maybe you can't beat Obstagoon or my Cargo GX. So like you're looking at like 5 different slices of the pie chart and you can't beat all of them, then maybe that's an issue. But if you can't beat just one slice of the pie chart and it's not one of the top 3, then I don't think it's and I don't think it should be an issue. Even if it's Baby Blounds, I don't think it should be an issue. The only 2 I wouldn't want to take a definitive loss to are Zacian and Malamar. And then the rest, like I said, if it's combined slices of the pie chart, then maybe you need to start looking at another deck or techs for covering those matchups. But yeah, so that's my estimation of what the meta will look like for the Limitless Qualifier number 1. I believe at the time of recording this, there are over 900 people registered for the tournament, so that's pretty wild. So onto the best decks. Of course, I mentioned Zacian ADP. It has results, it has refined lists, there's multiple variants depending on how you want to play it. There's so many ways to tech out this list. You can play the Alone Ninetales GX line for item search. You can play catchers or custom catchers. You can play a Luke Metal GX, just a one of as a tech for the mirror. You can play hammers for the mirror, Yell Grunt, Wait and See Hammer. You can play Absol, Theo, and you can play neither of them. You can play the Resource Management Aran Guru. This deck has everything. It's consistent. It has energy acceleration. It beats the decks that it shouldn't beat because of Altered Creation GX. Really the only thing it doesn't have is single prize attackers usually, but that's not even that big of a deal when you're knocking out single prize attackers and taking an extra prize. So, Zacian ADP, best deck in format, most popular deck for this tournament. I'm sure it'll do well. But I will say that, according to my spreadsheets I've been looking at, the matchup spread for Zacian ADP has been going down and down and down because it's pushing out its good matchups, and people only want to play things that can go 50-50 or better to their estimations against Zacian ADP. I'll probably be talking about that in an article, maybe the next week or 2. I wanted to touch on that effect that Zacian ADP is kind of making a meta that's worse and worse and worse for itself because of how good it is. It's kind of weird to think about, but that's how I'm looking at it. Anyway, Zacian ADP best deck in the format. Baby Blounds can beat Zacian ADP usually a majority of the time. So Baby Blounds is very good. It's a single prize deck, so it also fares well against any other GX and tag team decks. It's the bane of its existence is Malamar and Obstagoon. So if you're expecting a lot of those, maybe you can't. I don't think you ever tech for Malamar with Baby Blounds. You take that loss, but for Obstagoon, maybe you tech an Ultra Forest Cartonvoy or some sort of attacker that can hit Obstagoon. But Baby Blounds is very good because, like I said, it has a favorable Zacian ADP matchup, and that's kind of what it takes right now to make a deck very good. Then we got Malamar Tina, Spell Tag Malamar, Psychic Malamar, whatever you want to call it. It has somewhere around a 50-50 to Zacian ADP. It has a favored to Baby Blounds, so it looks like a no-brainer, but the deck just is not as consistent as Zacian ADP because it has evolutions and it has cards that don't allow you to draw 3 and accelerate an energy like Zacian does. And then, of course, it's also a little less consistent, give or take, than Baby Blounds. Baby Blounds, of course, needs to hit a welder, but you need to hit multiple stage 1s, and they have to stick on the board. Then you also have to have energy in the discard and energy in your hand sometimes. So, but Malamar, I think, is a very, very good choice for the tournament. It looks like it's favored versus Baby Blounds and even versus Zacian ADP, which are the other 2 big ones. So maybe now you just have to make yourself more consistent than the other Malamars, because that's a nice chunk of the pie chart as well. But I expect these 3 to be successful and popular. One of the lesser popular decks, Obstagoon. If people aren't teching for Obstagoon because it's a best of 1 tournament with so many rounds, Obstagoon is looking like it might be a little less popular. Obstagoon might be a good play. I'm not necessarily a fan of playing it, but an unteched Baby Blounds should never beat you. A Zacian ADP with no techs you can usually beat. There's a lot of decks that are just basic Pokemon attackers, and they're not teching for Obstagoon right now because not a lot of people are talking about the goons. So I do think Obstagoon has somewhat of a chance to perform well. but I don't think it will be popular at all. But I do think this could be a sleeper pick for the weekend. And the last deck I want to look at is Mill. Like I said, I did think this was a little bit of a better play earlier in the week than I do now, but it's still good. It has a solid matchup spread. Zacian ADP, I think you need to build Mill a little differently now if you want to play, if you want to have an even matchup versus Zacian. So you might need to run some Yell Grunts to slow them down in addition to your 4 Crushing Hammer already. So I do think the list could change up a bit to have an even Zacian ADP matchup instead of an unfavored one, and then you're looking pretty good across the board. If you aren't confident in your pace of play, then I don't think you should play Cinccino Mill, because although it has a very linear strategy, the last few turns of the game you have to resource management the correct cards, and those turns can take 3 minutes plus each. And 3 3-minute turns is 9 minutes added on to whatever the rest of your game took. So I would definitely practice those, how to close out games with Cinccino Mill against a multitude of decks if you're planning on playing this, because a tie in this tournament is a double game loss, which is also affecting what decks I think are good, what decks will be in this tournament and whatnot. So I don't think Control will be here at all, and if it is, it's not going to do well because of it's best of 125 minutes, and a tie is a double game loss. So of course you can find all that information over there on limitlesstcg.com, but I figured most of the people going into this tournament already knew that there are no ties from looking at the information on the tournament, but I should acknowledge that factors into how I think the meta share will look and what decks are the best. So, of course, we're looking at those top 3, the ADP Zacian, Psychic Malamar, and Baby Blacephalon. Obstagoon somewhere there in the outliers, thinking about its fairly good matchup spread, and then Cinccino Mill. If you can finish the games, then it looks pretty good. So that's it. Hope you all have fun with the Limitless TCG Invitational Qualifier number 1. I will be playing in it as well. Not sure if I'm going to stream my games yet. I might just chill and record them. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and subscribe to the channel if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Be sure to vote for me when you're playing in the Limitless Qualifiers, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.